The observation deck of the Orion Collective's Deep Space Monitoring Station had always been a place of quiet anticipation. Today, it transformed into a crucible of mounting tension. Captain Zara had seen countless anomalies during her 23 cycles of service, but nothing compared to the spectacle unfolding before her eyes. The quantum scanners pulse with an impossible rhythm, their holographic displays casting an ethereal blue glow across the faces of her crew. Each technician sat frozen, fingers hovering above communication panels, breath caught in their throats. The ship approaching was unlike anything in the Collective's extensive database, a vessel that seemed to defy the very principles of spatial navigation. "Confirm scanning parameters," Zara commanded, her voice cutting through the electric silence. Lieutenant Krell, the station's primary sensor analyst, ran his manipulation tentacles across the holographic display. His 3 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme cognitive processing among his species. "Scanning confirms." "Well, nothing makes sense, Captain." The ship appeared to shimmer at the edges of perception. One moment, it seemed a massive construct of impossible geometries. The next, it was almost transparent, a ghost of technological potential. Quantum entanglement markers danced around its hull like living mathematics, creating distortions that made seasoned navigators question their understanding of physical space. "Identify origin," Zara demanded, her scaled fingers gripping the command interface. Krell's response was hesitant. "The signature matches, human designations, but that's impossible. Humans were quarantined decades ago. Their last known vessel was destroyed during the Proxima incident." The memory hung in the air. A diplomatic disaster that had resulted in the complete isolation of human space. The Universal Council had been unanimous. Humanity was too unpredictable, too dangerous to engage directly. Their technologies were incomprehensible, their diplomatic approaches unconventional to the point of being threatening. And yet, here was proof of their continued existence. The ship continued its approach, seemingly unaware of, or uncaring about, the hundreds of sensor arrays tracking its impossible trajectory. It moved not with the predictable arc of standard space travel, but with a fluidity that suggested the very laws of physics were merely suggestions to be negotiated. "Communication protocols," Zara ordered, her voice steadied despite the hurricane of questions raging in her mind. Technician Area activated the standard greeting sequences, a complex mathematical pattern designed to establish initial contact with unknown vessels. Typically, this would produce a standard response or trigger defensive protocols. Instead, nothing happened. Or rather, everything happened. The ship's quantum signature began to pulse, not in response, but in what seemed like a completely independent rhythm. It was studying them, Captain Zara realized. The approach was deliberate, calculated, a predator's approach that suggested complete confidence in its superiority. "Status of defensive grid," she asked, though her eyes never left the mesmerizing display. "Fully charged," Krell responded. "But, Captain, our weapons would be less effective against that vessel than throwing pebbles at a mountain." A collective shudder ran through the crew. The human ship continued its approach, now close enough that individual technological complexities became visible. Its hull seemed to breathe, to adapt, microscopic systems continuously reshaping and responding to the quantum environment around it. This was more than a ship. This was a statement, a warning. And humanity had just announced its return to a galaxy that had forgotten and feared its potential. The universal archives of galactic history occupied an entire planetoid, its crystalline memory banks storing millennia of interstellar knowledge. Dr. Eliana Voss, chief historical researcher of the Orion Collective, pulled up the classified files on humanity with trembling hands. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing fragments of a history both fascinating and terrifying. 50 years earlier, the Universal Council had convened in the grand chambers of Nexus Prime, a massive space station that served as the diplomatic heart of galactic civilization. Representatives from 200 different species gathered, their translation fields humming with anticipation. Humanity's diplomatic envoy was scheduled to present a proposal that had already sent shockwaves through scientific communities. Dr. Marcus Chen stepped forward, a moment captured in archived footage that had been studied countless times. He was unremarkable in physical appearance. Average height, dark hair, wearing a simple gray suit that seemed almost primitive compared to the ornate biological and technological attire of other species. "We've solved the quantum entanglement communication problem," Chen had begun, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. What followed was not a simple scientific presentation, but a complete deconstruction of established interstellar communication theories. Chen's proposal didn't just improve existing technologies, it rendered them obsolete. The method he described would allow instantaneous communication across unlimited distances, eliminating the light-speed barrier that had defined galactic interactions for millennia. The representatives from the Zarn Confederacy were the first to react. Their crystalline communication networks represented the most advanced communication technology in the known galaxy, or so they had believed. Chen's presentation revealed not just an alternative, but a fundamental reimagining of information transfer. Senior diplomat Krelax of the Zarn stood, his prismatic body shifting colors in a display of extreme emotional response. "Impossible," he had declared, his translation field vibrating with a mixture of anger and fear. But the mathematical proofs were irrefutable. Chen proceeded to demonstrate a working prototype, transmitting complex data streams across the entire station instantaneously. Species that had taken centuries to develop their current communication technologies watched in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. Instantaneous communication meant instantaneous coordination. It meant the ability to share information, strategy, and technological developments at a speed that would completely reshape galactic dynamics. What happened next was never fully recorded in official documents. 3 days after the presentation, humanity withdrew from all diplomatic channels. The Universal Council received a single transmission, a complex mathematical equation that seemed to be both a farewell and a warning. Then silence. Attempts to contact human colonies returned no responses. Exploration vessels sent to human-controlled space found empty stations, abandoned technologies that were simultaneously more advanced and more primitive than anything else in the galaxy. Dr. Voss zoomed in on the final transmission. Hidden within the mathematical equation was a pattern, something that suggested the withdrawal was not an accident, but a calculated move. The archival records showed the aftermath. Entire technological development tracks were abandoned. Species that had been on the verge of certain discoveries suddenly found their research irrelevant. The Zarn Confederacy's communication network became a museum piece overnight. Humanity had not just presented a technology. They had shown the galaxy a glimpse of a completely different approach to existence, and then disappeared. Until now. Dr. Voss's communication panel blinked, a message from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. The human ship was approaching, carrying with it the weight of a 50-year mystery that was about to be answered. The first scout ships launched from the Galactic Confederation's forward defense platform were the pride of 3 separate star systems, sleek quantum interceptors designed to track, analyze, and neutralize any potential threat. They moved with a precision that had made them legends of space exploration. Commander Rylan of the Eris Flotilla watched his squadron approach the human vessel with calculated confidence. Their formation was perfect, a complex geometric pattern that allowed maximum sensor coverage and minimal vulnerability. Each ship carried advanced scanning equipment capable of penetrating the most sophisticated stealth technologies known to the galaxy. "Maintain standard approach vector," Rylan commanded, his neural link feeding tactical information directly to his pilot's sensory systems. The first indication that something was wrong came almost immediately. The human ship didn't just detect the approaching squadron. It seemed to anticipate their every move with impossible precision. Where the scout ships expected to intercept, the vessel simply wasn't there. It wasn't just evading. It was playing. Lieutenant Sarah, Rylan's second in command, reported with increasing frustration. "Commander, our tracking systems can't maintain a consistent lock. The vessel is I can't even describe what it's doing." Mathematical impossibilities began to stack up in the sensor logs. The human ship moved not in linear trajectories, but in quantum probability waves. It existing simultaneously in multiple potential positions, dancing between potential realities faster than the most advanced computer systems could calculate. One moment, a scout ship would have a perfect targeting solution. The next, the human vessel would be hundreds of kilometers away, its movement so smooth it appeared to have never moved at all. The ship wasn't just avoiding detection, it was demonstrating a fundamental understanding of space, motion, and perception that made the Confederation's most advanced technologies look like primitive toys. "Tactical analysis," Ryland demanded, fighting to keep the uncertainty from his voice. The ship's AI companion processed the incoming data, its holographic form flickering with confusion. Impossible correlation detected. The human vessel is not just avoiding our ships, it's learning from them. Each evasive maneuver is creating a comprehensive tactical profile of our entire squadron. Ryland watched in stunned silence as his perfectly executed intercept formation began to fall apart. The scout ships were no longer hunting. They were being herded, guided by an intelligence so advanced it treated space itself as a malleable concept. A communication burst erupted across all channels. Not a threat, not a warning, but a complex mathematical sequence that seemed to be both a greeting and a challenge. It was a message that said, without a single word, "We see you, we understand you, and we are in complete control." Lieutenant Sarah's voice cracked with a mixture of fear and professional frustration. "Commander, our entire tactical approach is compromised. The human ship is. It's analyzing our communication protocols in real time. It's learning faster than we can adapt." The dance continued. Scout ships that had been the terror of potential aggressors now moved like confused children, their sophisticated tracking systems reduced to little more than blinking lights against the impossible presence of the human vessel. Ryland understood then what was happening. This was not an approach. This was not a threat. This was a demonstration. Humanity was showing the galaxy exactly how far behind they had fallen during those 50 years of silence. And they were enjoying every moment of it. Dr. Lyra's research station hung in the delicate balance between scientific excitement and absolute terror. The preliminary scans of the human vessel had consumed her every waking moment, pushing the boundaries of xenotechnological understanding to their absolute limits. A holographic display flickered with impossible data streams. What her team was observing defied every known principle of engineering, biology, and quantum mechanics. The human ship was not just a machine. It was a living system that blurred the line between technology and organism in ways that made her previous understanding of advanced technologies look like primitive sketches. "Microscopic repair systems," she muttered, zooming into a molecular-level scan of the ship's hull. Each nanoscale component moved with a purpose that suggested collective intelligence. They weren't simply repairing damage. They were adapting, evolving, communicating in a language of molecular interactions that made traditional computer systems look like children's toys. Her senior researcher, Dr. Kamen, leaned in closer to the display. "The hull is responding to quantum fluctuations before they even occur," he said, his voice a mixture of professional analysis and pure wonder. "It's like the ship is predicting environmental changes at a subatomic level." The technological complexity was staggering. Organic and mechanical systems intertwined so completely that it became impossible to determine where one ended and the other began. Biological neural networks integrated with quantum computing processors in a way that suggested a fundamental reimagining of what constituted intelligence. Lyra pulled up the comparative analysis with existing galactic technologies. The Zarn Confederacy's most advanced communication networks looked like crude smoke signals. The biomechanical systems of the Terran Collective appeared as simple mechanical constructs. This human vessel represented something entirely different. A technological ecosystem that was more akin to a living organism than a machine. "Look at the energy distribution," she instructed her team, highlighting a complex series of quantum interactions. A ship doesn't just convert energy. It creates it, redistributes it, adapts it in real time. Each system seemed to communicate with others in a manner that mimicked biological symbiosis. Repair mechanisms didn't just fix damage. They learned from it. Computational systems didn't just process information. They evolved understanding. The entire vessel was a single, coherent intelligence that treated technology, biology, and physics as malleable concepts. Dr. Kamen's hands shook as he adjusted the scanning parameters. The quantum entanglement markers suggest something impossible. These systems are communicating across dimensional boundaries we haven't even theorized yet. Lyra understood the implications. This wasn't just an advanced ship. This was a technological breakthrough that would rewrite every scientific understanding of the galaxy. Humanity hadn't just developed a new technology. They had created an entirely new way of existing. A sudden burst of data cascaded across the screens. The ship was transmitting, not a message, but a complex mathematical representation that seemed to be an invitation to understand. It was as if the vessel itself was offering a glimpse into a technological paradigm so advanced it could barely be comprehended. We're being studied, Lyra realized, just as much as we're studying them. The human ship continued its approach, each moment revealing layers of technological complexity that challenged everything the scientific community thought they knew about the limits of innovation, intelligence, and the very nature of technological development. Humanity had returned, and they were showing the galaxy exactly how far they had come. The communication hub of the Universal Nexus erupted into chaos. Every known communication channel simultaneously activated, flooding systems across hundreds of star systems with a transmission that defied conventional understanding. Chief Communication Analyst Zoran watched in stunned silence as the complex signal began to unfold. It wasn't a message in any traditional sense. It was a living, breathing intellectual challenge that seemed to adapt to each receiving system's computational capabilities. The first layer appeared to be a mathematical sequence, but not just any sequence. It was a multi-dimensional puzzle that changed its fundamental structure based on the processing capabilities of the system attempting to decode it. Species with advanced quantum computers found themselves confronted with increasingly complex mathematical challenges. Those with more primitive systems received seemingly simpler, yet equally intricate patterns. "It's not a message," Dr. Aryaven, the station's leading xenolinguistic expert, muttered. "It's an intelligence test." The transmission continued to evolve. Embedded within the mathematical sequences were cultural references that seemed impossible. Fragments of music from forgotten human civilizations, artistic representations that referenced historical events across multiple alien cultures, linguistic patterns that suggested a deep, almost impossible understanding of communication itself. Each species received a slightly different version of the transmission. The Zarn Confederacy's communication arrays decoded complex quantum mechanics problems that pushed the boundaries of their scientific understanding. The biological communication networks of the Terran Collective found themselves confronted with intricate genetic puzzles that seemed to speak directly to their evolutionary history. Zoran watched as his colleagues began to piece together the true nature of the transmission. This was more than a message. It was a probing, a testing, a subtle examination of galactic intelligence. "It's adaptive," one of the junior analysts whispered. "The transmission is learning from each system it encounters." The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Some species found themselves entranced by the intellectual challenge. Others felt a deep primal fear of an intelligence so far beyond their comprehension. Research stations across multiple star systems began dedicating entire teams to decoding the increasingly complex transmission. Hidden within the layers were fragments that suggested something more. Glimpses of technological understanding, hints of scientific breakthroughs that seemed to casually rewrite established scientific theories. It was as if humanity was offering a taste of their technological capabilities, a subtle demonstration of how far they had advanced. Dr. Ven's hands moved rapidly across her analysis interface. "This is more than communication," she explained to the stunned communication team. This is a comprehensive psychological profile. They're not just sending a message. They're studying us. The transmission continued to spread, each moment revealing new layers of complexity. It touched every aspect of galactic communication: scientific, cultural, psychological. Some systems found themselves solving problems they hadn't even known existed. Others discovered fundamental flaws in their most basic scientific assumptions. Zoran understood then what was truly happening. This was not an invasion. This was not a threat. This was an introduction. Humanity was showing the galaxy exactly who they were, an intelligence so advanced, so comprehensive, that traditional concepts of communication, conflict, and understanding no longer applied. And they were just getting started. The Universal Council chambers had never known such silence. Representatives from 200 different species sat frozen, their collective breath suspended in anticipation. The massive holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered to life, revealing a figure that was both completely human and something entirely beyond human understanding. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez appeared to be in her mid-40s, dressed in a simple gray suit that seemed almost deliberately unremarkable. But there was nothing ordinary about her presence. Her image seemed to shimmer slightly, suggesting she was simultaneously present and not quite there, a technological projection that defied conventional understanding of communication. "We've been watching," she began, her voice carrying a calm that was more terrifying than any direct threat. The translation systems struggled momentarily, not because of linguistic complexity, but because the underlying communication seemed to carry layers of meaning that transcended simple verbal translation. Each species heard the message slightly differently, tailored to their unique psychological and cultural understanding. High Chancellor Krelax of the Zarn Confederacy was the first to find his voice. "You disappeared 50 years ago," he stammered, a combination of fear and professional diplomacy barely concealing his underlying tension. "Your sudden return." Elena's smile was both a greeting and a challenge. "We didn't disappear," she interrupted. "We were preparing." The holographic display began to shift, revealing glimpses of technological and societal development that defied comprehension. Entire planetary ecosystems transformed. Scientific breakthroughs that seemed to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics. Technological advancements that made the collective achievements of the galactic community look like primitive scribbles. "Your civilization has reached a critical point," she continued. "We've been monitoring your development, your conflicts, your potential. And now we're offering a choice." The chamber erupted into controlled chaos. Some representatives reached for communication devices. Others sat paralyzed, understanding the profound implications of her words. Ambassador Rodriguez represented something far beyond a traditional diplomatic envoy. She was a messenger, a challenge, and a potential bridge between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. "We're not here to conquer," she explained, her words carrying a weight that seemed to fill every corner of the massive chamber. "We're here to elevate. But elevation requires a willingness to change, to grow, to understand that everything you thought you knew is merely a starting point." Glimpses of human development flashed across the holographic display. Planetary rehabilitation projects that transformed dead worlds into thriving ecosystems. Technological solutions to challenges that had plagued galactic civilizations for millennia. Medical breakthroughs that redefined the concept of life itself. It was a demonstration, a challenge, an invitation. High Chancellor Krelax found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "What do you want?" Elena's smile deepened. "To talk, to share, to show you what's possible when a civilization decides to truly understand itself and its potential." The moment stretched. 200 species held their collective breath, understanding that this was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was a pivot point in galactic history. Humanity had returned, and they were offering something far more dangerous than conquest. They were offering change. Panic swept through the galactic communication networks like a quantum storm. The Universal Council's emergency session had been broadcast across hundreds of star systems, and the implications were sinking in with terrifying clarity. Admiral Tara Revick of the Confederation Defense Fleet stood in her command center, watching multiple holographic displays cascade with conflicting information. Military strategists from a dozen different species worked frantically, attempting to analyze the potential threat posed by humanity's return. "We can't predict their capabilities," Commander Zelm reported, his multi-jointed fingers dancing across tactical displays. "Our most advanced simulations are coming up empty. It's like trying to predict an ocean's movement using a child's sandcastle." The military reports told a story of complete strategic incomprehension. Humanity's technological capabilities had advanced so far beyond current galactic standards that traditional concepts of military strategy became meaningless. Defensive systems that had taken centuries to develop now seemed like primitive toys. Intelligence reports continued to stream in. Humanity had been busy during their 50-year absence. Entire planetary systems had been transformed. Scientific breakthroughs that touched on every conceivable field of study suggested a civilization that had reimagined the very concept of technological development. Dr. Aria Venn, now serving as the primary xenoanalytical advisor, presented her findings to the Emergency Council. "They're not just technologically superior," she explained, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "They've developed a completely different approach to existence itself." Planetary rehabilitation projects showed worlds brought back from environmental collapse. Medical technologies demonstrated the ability to reverse genetic damage, extend lifespans, and solve health challenges that had been considered impossible. Economic models suggested solutions to resource scarcity that made current galactic economic systems look like primitive bartering. "We're facing something beyond a technological threat," Admiral Revick muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "This is an existential challenge to everything we understand about progress, civilization, and potential." Military strategists from different species began to realize the futility of their traditional defensive considerations. The human vessel that had approached, the one that had danced around scout ships and demonstrated impossible technological capabilities, was just a hint of humanity's true potential. Some species advocated for immediate defensive preparations. Others argued for diplomatic engagement. But beneath the surface, a more profound terror was taking root. Humanity wasn't presenting a threat. They were presenting a mirror, a reflection of how limited galactic civilizations had become. "They could have conquered us at any moment," Commander Zelm observed, a note of grudging respect in his voice. "Instead, they're offering something far more dangerous. The something was opportunity, the chance to grow, to change." Communication intercepts suggested that humanity's approach was not about domination, but about potential. They had spent 50 years preparing not for conquest, but for transformation. Each technological breakthrough, each scientific advancement, seemed designed to challenge existing paradigms rather than replace them. Admiral Revick understood then what made humanity truly terrifying. It wasn't their technology. It wasn't their capabilities. It was their vision. A vision that suggested the galaxy was capable of so much more than anyone had ever imagined. And they were just getting started. The transformation began quietly, almost imperceptibly. Humanity's ship, that impossible vessel that had captured the imagination of an entire galaxy, began to share more than just technologies. It shared understanding. Philosophical concepts that rewrote the fundamental approach to existence itself cascaded through communication networks, touching every aspect of galactic civilization. Dr. Lyra watched in amazement as the first wave of shared technologies began to take root. A medical breakthrough from one of humanity's research colonies could regenerate entire ecosystems. An energy distribution method developed during their 50-year absence could solve resource scarcity for hundreds of planetary systems. But it wasn't just about the technologies. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez appeared again, this time in research stations, diplomatic chambers, and communication hubs across multiple star systems. Her presentations were less about showing off humanity's capabilities and more about demonstrating a fundamental reimagining of potential. "We didn't isolate ourselves to hide," she explained during one pivotal transmission. "We isolated ourselves to grow. to understand, to prepare. The galactic community began to realize that humanity's absence had been a deliberate, calculated period of development. They hadn't been hiding. They had been becoming something entirely new. Planetary rehabilitation projects sprouted across multiple star systems. Technologies that could reverse centuries of environmental damage were shared freely. Economic models that prioritized collective growth over individual competition began to replace existing systems. High Chancellor Krulax of the Zarn Confederacy found himself at the center of this transformation. The species that had once been the most technologically advanced now sat in humble learning sessions, absorbing concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew about progress. It was never about conquest, he would later record in his personal logs. It was about elevation. Humanity shared technologies that solved problems thought to be impossible. Medical breakthroughs that could extend lifespans. Energy systems that could transform barren planets into thriving ecosystems. Communication technologies that broke down not just linguistic barriers, but fundamental misunderstandings between different species. The human ship continued its approach, now surrounded by a growing network of collaborative research stations. It was no longer just a vessel. It was a beacon of potential. Scientific understanding underwent a complete transformation. Disciplines that had been separate began to merge. Biological research intertwined with quantum physics. Technological development became inseparable from philosophical understanding. The very concept of knowledge itself was reimagined. Dr. Aria Venn, leading a massive interdisciplinary research initiative, discovered something profound. Humanity's 50-year absence had been a period of deliberate collective growth. They hadn't just developed technologies. They had developed a completely new approach to existence. "We are offering you a choice," Elena Rodriguez explained in her final transmission to the Universal Council. Not submission, not conquest, but true collaboration. The galaxy stood at a crossroads. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as partners, not to dominate, but to elevate. As the human ship finally reached the central communication hub of the Universal Nexus, it became clear that this was more than a diplomatic mission. This was the beginning of something entirely new, a transformation that would reshape the very understanding of what it meant to be advanced civilization. Humanity had returned, and nothing would ever be the same.